Now, the situation that I'm sure happened with a lot of families is parents were almost passing ships in the night. I don't think I ever got to see my parents together. I was about 1.5. They had a conversation and it was decided I would go back to Trinidad and be raised by my mother's parents. But I'm not alone. There were other children like me who were born here and got sent back there.
My father came 58, he was a hoist engineer, and he was due to buy machinery with the hope of coming back, and then decided to stay. But he was missing his wife and his 4 children. Could not afford to send for all of them, so he needed his wife, and he decided the eldest child. So I was very much a Windrush person, and I came here with my mother. And that story in itself meant, for my mother, she left behind 3 children, the youngest of which was 2. It was the only boy in the family, so she had 3 girls, and she left her 2-year-old son. So the minute she arrived in England, her aim, her purpose, her ambition was to save and give money to Chenille Travel Agency, a Chinese company in Jamaica, to get her children over here. But of course, in the meantime, you've got to get the accommodation.
My mother came here when she was in 1955, 56 rather, and I didn't see my mother till I joined her here at the age of 11 in November 1966. My mother came to England on her own, so my father was in Jamaica. So for her, it was extremely challenging to be away from her children. My brother, I've got a brother who was a year older than me. So for her to have stayed here, working extremely hard whilst her young children, her young 2 sons are in Jamaica, must have been extremely challenging.
There were a lot of couples that made that journey from 48 onwards who left children in the Caribbean, firstborn children, who were left to be raised by the extended family, more than likely grandparents.
So a few of the older ones were here in my dad's family, and eventually they were just sending, as they could afford. You worked and you brought them over as best you could, piecemeal.
But the tenacity of those parents when they got their children and what they were able to do to develop those children, to make them rounded people, yeah? It was hard work. But they also acknowledged, like people like me, who then had to have that energy and understanding. When my 2 sisters and brother arrived 8 years after I'd been an only child for 8 years, and what that had meant in my life, yes? And all of that.
These couples came with the hope that in a few years, this child will be sent for. And however, nature and life came about. And before they knew it, there were children being born in England. That created a divide. Child in the Caribbean, children in England.
I would say the emotional trauma of being separated from your children. It's bad enough that as children we were torn from our parents, but this maternal break, which causes a lot of issues later on in life, they lived through it. And I don't have all the ins and outs, but I know to the point where they literally downed everything and sold up and moved to Trinidad when I was 7. They could not continue to function without me.
The traumatic thing was, as I said, seeing families who just didn't have their children, so that Windrush divide.
The difficulties of being separated from my parents is one thing. The trauma for them of having their family unit just fragmented is another. But yet, we were able somehow, in my story, I know it's not for everyone, we were able to turn that over and get all the goodness from the scenario.